Hello, I'm Julia, and in this video I'm going to tell you about my string quartet number 9. This one is quite a stark, quite abrupt piece. It's certainly attention-grabbing. It's designed to make you sit up and listen, and it's all based around diminished chords. So although there's a vague sense of a harmonic sort of home, it is just that, a vague sense. It's not a piece to make you feel settled at all, and that's reinforced by the fact that the phrases are 9 bars long, which is obviously not a regular phrase length. So that adds to this feeling of disorientation. And it kind of takes away this idea of a home to come back to, at least in harmonic terms, which means our home has to be based on something else. And that something else is in the patterns. This piece contains these very insistent repeated chords, and this is a pattern that keeps coming back. And in fact, the whole thing is based on repeating the opening section, although there's a bit of respite in the middle. But basically, the idea of this piece is that it's an experiment in mixing and matching different sections of this opening section. Although each part is playing the same notes each time as it did in the first section, at least for the first few repeats, the parts start in different places in the phrase each time, so you get different combinations of rhythms and notes coming together. For example, in the section beginning at A, the viola and cello parts are both exactly as they were at the opening. But the violin parts, both of them start on bar 4, so bars 1 to 3 are moved to the end of the phrase, so we get this different combination. And then in the section beginning at B, the violins play exactly what they did the first time round, whereas the viola and the cello both start this time on bar 6, with bars 1 to 5 moved to the end of the phrase, and so on. The starting point in the phrase changes each time for each part. There are 2 reasons why I took this approach. Firstly, I wanted to play with the effects of overlapping the parts in a different way, using quite an economical approach, just taking the material from the opening but rearranging it. But secondly, I also wanted to make it relatively straightforward for the players, because the parts themselves aren't particularly user-friendly at first glance. They're full of these diminished sequences. Lots of chords, and they don't fall particularly nicely under the fingers. But effectively, you only have to learn them once because each player is repeating the same thing each time the repeat comes around, albeit in a slightly different order. So I quite like this idea of pushing the amount of interest you have while minimising the difficulty for the players, because I still want it to be enjoyable to play, even if it's quite abrupt. So I think that's quite an important consideration. And I find it interesting how changing the patterns around each time causes certain rhythms and certain chords to take on different prominence in the different versions. In particular, you get this interplay between these 3 repeated chords in the different parts. Sometimes they fall together, and sometimes you get this effect where one part is answering another. From D, we start to get some longer notes coming in, which provides a little bit of relief from all of the chords. Basically, these replace the quaver passages, so there's a bit less movement going on. But they're still swelling in and out. They're not particularly comfortable. They're not particularly static, although they provide a contrast in texture. And as the repeats continue, the repeating chords start to disappear a bit, so things do calm down a bit. Although in a sense I think this almost serves to highlight them more when they do appear, which they do increasingly from G. And finally we come to a section in which the chords are removed completely, just leaving the quaver passages from the original version. So we get another contrast in texture, this time with a bit more movement, but in between we have these moments of silence. But it's all still built on the same material, which means that pretty much everything we've heard through the whole piece was there in the first 9 bars. And I like the economy in that. And around the time I wrote this, I'd been listening to Beethoven a lot and learning a bit about his piano sonatas, and he was obviously a master of extracting the most he could out of a simple phrase or a motif. Just think of the opening of the Fifth Symphony. And obviously, this is a very different context and very different material. And I've done relatively little with it. There's no playing around with the harmony or the tonality or anything like that. But that sort of idea of economy was something that I was playing with when I wrote this one. So I hope that helps to make a bit more sense of it, and I hope you enjoy it.